Part 6. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Se Nian Bai. Chapter 51. Su Ming took Wang Ke and Defu to the back mountain. As he approached the forest where the bees made their home, several wasps suddenly fell from the sky and blocked the road with a buzzing sound. One of them lowered its height and flew in front of Wang Ke and Defu. It stared at the wolf-dog brothers with its compound eyes. The wolf-dog brothers suddenly became nervous and barked at the wasps hovering in the air. "Don't shoot, my own people," Su Ming snapped his fingers and released a burst of mental power to calm down the wolf-dog brothers. He arranged the wasp swarm here to protect the bees. It seems that the wasps are not only very dedicated, but also very smart. They actually know to set up checkpoints outside the forest instead of just wandering around in the forest. In this way, if the wasps appear, if there is a strong enemy that cannot resist, you can call the police in advance and give the bee swarm time to move. At the same time, he released his mental power and made contact with the sentry wasp. The latter felt this familiar feeling. After circling Su Ming for a few times, he waved his wings and flew away, continuing to stand guard. The wolf-dog brothers restrained their fangs, but they still looked confused. They had some misunderstandings about what Su Ming meant. How could these little guys with wings and a completely different appearance from them be one of their own? Are they flying puppy pups? The forest is full of life, and the bee swarm seems to have regained its vitality. Bees of all sizes are flying around everywhere, busy collecting honey and making honey. Among them, there are also teams of wasps patrolling back and forth, with a clear division of labor. Several heavy large honeycombs hang in the middle of the woods, which are the residences of bees. In addition, there are many fist-sized small honeycombs hanging on the treetops of the forest like fruits, the kind that were given to Su Ming before. Bees are constantly coming in and out of the honeycombs. A little further away, two hornets' nests that could be described as huge were hanging on the treetops 20 or 30 meters above the ground, like two big eyes, watching the movements of the entire forest from a high position. The bees and the wasps performed their respective duties, one making honey and the other acting as a guard, and there was no further fire or bloodshed. Most of the backbone of the bee swarm were survivors of the last battle. They all knew Su Ming. When they saw Su Ming coming, they gathered around Su Ming from all directions. Hundreds of bees, large and small, were circling up and down around Su Ming. The scene was very eye-catching and caused Wang Ke and Defu to scream uncontrollably. "Thank you for your hard work, comrades, let's get going." Su Ming waved his hand gently like a general in military parade, and the swarms dispersed and went to work. He stood on tiptoes and picked a fist-sized honeycomb from a nearby tree. It was already filled with honey. He smeared some on it and tasted it. Sure enough, it had the same effect on improving mental power as before. In just a few days, the bee colony recovered its vitality, increased in number, and began to make honey on a large scale. This was partly due to the ability of animal friends, and another important reason was that the bee colony here, a queen bee was reborn. The role of the queen bee is indispensable to the bee colony. The queen bee can command the bee colony, continuously give birth to new bees, and strengthen the bee colony. To a certain extent, the queen bee's contribution to the bee colony is greater than Su Ming. Without Su Ming, this swarm of bees would be just like other wild bee swarms, in a state of confusion. And without a queen, the bee colony will die out. The honeycomb where the queen is located is about the size of a basketball, hanging on an old locust tree, 4 or 5 meters above the ground. Su Ming took off his shirt and climbed little by little to the edge of the honeycomb by climbing on the branches. Through the hole of the honeycomb, I could see a queen bee lying in the honeycomb with a slender waist and fat hips, and her wings had already molted. So big, Su Ming was a little surprised. A normal queen bee is actually only slightly larger than an average bee, and her size will not exceed 2 or 3 times that of an average bee. And the queen bee in front of me is almost as big as half a Coke bottle, it's a giant. No wonder the bee colony recovers so quickly. The fertility of such a giant queen must be amazing. This little bitch is so fertile. The queen bee also noticed Su Ming's arrival. After staring at Su Ming for a while, she actually took the initiative to pass on a message of consciousness. Although the consciousness is very weak, the content is very clear. If translated in human words, there are only two words: master. Su Ming was slightly startled. What is going on? The general intelligence of the bee swarm is low. Except for the obvious improvement in the intelligence of Urguzu, who has been following him for a long time, the rest can only simply accept orders and cannot communicate with himself for the time being. To convey a relatively clear consciousness like a queen bee requires at least the intelligence of a few cats. The queen bee's communication ability just now has even surpassed that of a big-headed catfish. Speaking of big head, Su Ming couldn't help but get angry. That guy was just a fool. He only had meat but not brains. He had been following him for so long, and he was still confused now. To express a simple meaning, even if we communicate for a long time, we may not be able to explain clearly. In contrast, this new queen bee is naturally much smarter than other bees. You want to see me for something? Su Ming tentatively sent out his mental power. The queen actually made a somewhat anthropomorphic movement, shaking her molted little wings, as if waving, followed by a wave of uneasiness. Animals have an almost instinctive intuition about danger. Su Ming could detect that the queen bee, who was very intelligent, was not satisfied with this forest and felt that it was not a safe habitat. You mean you want to move? Su Ming pondered for a moment and felt that the queen bee's idea was not unreasonable. Although this place is deep in the mountains and old forests, and the nearest artificial road is probably more than 5 kilometers away, it does not mean that no one will come. Now the bee colony is very useful to him, and can stably provide honey to restore his mental strength. And this queen bee is obviously a product of evolution. If such a large queen bee is discovered, it will definitely attract the attention of humans, and maybe they will be caught and studied. If something goes wrong with this group of bees, the loss will be huge. Although there is the protection of the wasp, Su Ming does not want the wasp to kill all the people who accidentally break in here. He is a friend of animals, not a murderer. What's more, as the bee colony continues to grow and the number increases, more honey will be produced in the future, and the flowers and plants in this forest will seem a little insufficient. Thinking of this, Su Ming slid to the ground holding the tree trunk. The mental power suddenly opened up, covering all the surrounding bees and wasps, and then issued an order to the bee colony. Move to the deeper part of the mountain. The specific place to move to is decided by the queen bee. It must be safe, and there must be enough flowers in the surrounding environment to make honey. Anyway, bees and wasps can fly, so there is no problem of long distance. As long as they settle down, they can send a wasp team to tell them the specific location and hand in the big blue beehive regularly. After arranging everything, the bee colony began to move, moving down the beehives from the trees one by one, and slowly flying towards the depths of the mountains with the beehives. Su Ming did not leave immediately, but hugged the queen bee's beehive and walked a distance in the mountains with the moving team, constantly communicating with the queen bee with mental power. He could clearly feel that every time he came into contact with mental power, the queen bee would feel a sense of pleasure. The reason why this giant queen bee can have a certain wisdom and is larger than the average queen bee is definitely because of her mental power. For the queen bee, Su Ming's mental power is even more attractive than royal jelly. It's just the right opportunity to get along with the queen bee for a while. The queen bee refused to stay in the nest honestly, but swung her plump tail, crawled out lazily, and arched directly into Su Ming's arms, while constantly sending out emotions of attachment, as if she wanted Su Ming to hold her. Slow down, don't break your waist. The queen bee was about the same size as a newborn kitten at this time. Because her tail was too big and round, her waist looked extremely slender, giving people the illusion that it would break in two with a slight touch. Su Ming quickly and gently held the queen bee with both hands, like holding a child, and hugged it in his arms. The queen bee lay in Su Ming's arms and fell asleep sweetly. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 52. Su Ming followed the bee colony and walked further and further into the mountains. At first, there were grasslands and forests around, but it gradually became difficult to walk. There were many jagged rocks. In the distant mountains and forests, there were occasionally a few night cries of unknown animals. Su Ming then put down the queen bee and said goodbye to the bee colony temporarily. The huge main nest was carried by hundreds of worker bees and flew in the air. The queen bee showed a small head from the hive and kept watching Su Ming leave in the air, and kept sending waves of unwillingness to separate. It's not a life and death separation, there's no need to be so hesitant. Su Ming looked heartless. He laughed at the queen bee, waved his hand, turned around and strode towards the outside of the mountain. The queen bee was actually a little bit tempered and refused to leave. She kept lying in the hive and desperately used her mental power to contact Su Ming, until Su Ming walked farther and farther, and her weak mental power could no longer contact Su Ming. Because of the friend of animals, the queen bee's intelligence is far superior to that of ordinary bees, so for it, Su Ming is not only its master, but also its mentor of life growth. At the same time, he is the only person in the world who can communicate with it. After Su Ming walked away, the queen bee slowly crawled back to the hive and lay in the huge empty nest. There were flying fellow bees everywhere around, but for some reason, the queen bee's simple heart had a strange emotion called loneliness. When Su Ming rushed back to the zoo, it was already early in the morning. He first went back to the waterside to drink a glass of monkey wine, then put the big blue honey into his arms and went straight to the water army lake. The lake was quiet at night, and there was no ghost around the water army lake. Thousands of excavators were lurking under the calm lake, ready to go. Start work. Su Ming waved his hand and sprinkled his mental power on the lake. This time, it took 5 hours. Su Ming used honey to replenish his mental power. He stopped the project when it was slightly bright, and went back to Ting Feng Shui Pavilion to sleep and rest. Mental power is not omnipotent. He needs to sleep for at least a few hours every day. He doesn't want to die suddenly by the lake. During the day, he went to feed the animals with Master Peng. The pregnant female wolf was very irritable during this period. She was not happy with everyone all day long and almost hurt the breeder several times. Whether it is a woman or a female beast, she has never been a reasonable person. When she is looking for trouble and getting angry, her IQ is as high as Einstein. When she is angry, her combat power is second only to Ultraman. When she is crazy, her danger is second only to Tibetan Mastiff. The danger level of the female wolf when she is pregnant has obviously exceeded that of the Tibetan Mastiff. Even the Wolf King dare not approach it. The Wolf King held a piece of beef in his mouth and approached the female wolf cautiously. His tail even swayed left and right a few times unnaturally, looking like a flatterer. As a result, he was slapped on the face by the female wolf with a claw, almost disfigured. The Wolf King's hair was messy, and he stood up and tilted his mouth to Su Ming, signaling Su Ming to get her. Coward, you can't get your wife, and you want me to get her. Su Ming rolled his eyes. For this, the Wolf King could only express his helplessness. Every family has its own problems, and wolves are no exception. Su Ming coaxed and deceived, and finally got the female wolf. He mixed beef with sour plums, tomatoes, and other things, beat them into a paste, and fed the female wolf through the cage. When will it give birth? It's too much trouble. Su Ming pointed at the female wolf and asked Master Peng with a headache. Be patient, it's about to give birth. Master Peng patted Su Ming's shoulder, looking helpless. Now among all the breeders, only Su Ming can get close to the female wolf to let her eat, so the responsibility of serving the female wolf falls on Su Ming's shoulders. After being despised by Su Ming several times, A new anteater finally got smarter and stopped licking holes when he saw them. But somehow, he developed a new bad habit of digging holes. Su Ming talked to it several times, but the effect was not good. This big guy from North America seemed to be not used to the local climate. After coming to China, he was like a manic patient, restless and kept moving and biting. Does it have to speak English? Su Ming scratched his head and let it go. It can dig if it wants. Anyway, the zoo floor is made of cement, and anteaters are not good at digging holes. It can't expect any results even if it digs for a lifetime. When its claws bleed, it will stop making trouble. Just like this, day by day, it comes and goes with various animals during the day. Every night, a lonely figure will appear by the dark water army lake, sitting on the lakeside dock, staring at the lake infatuatedly, sitting there until most of the night. The underwater project is progressing very smoothly, advancing at a speed of 40 to 50 meters every day. As Su Ming's mental power became stronger and his control ability increased, the excavation teams controlled by his mental power became smarter and the speed of the project progressed. Once, when Su Ming was measuring a lot in the middle of the night, he felt a little sleepy, and the underwater passage suddenly collapsed, crushing dozens of loaches that were shaking their tails and drilling forward, and crushing a group of crabs that were carrying soil and rocks to death on the spot. Later, the loaches had to work hard to get out of the landslide site. Miners have been pitiful since ancient times. They were crushed to death alive without even a pension. Because it was an underwater operation, the passage was deep underground, and the mud cave was inevitably soft when soaked in water, so landslides were inevitable. Su Ming learned his lesson and secretly bought a batch of pipes. Every time he dug out a section, he found that the soil was soft and might cause landslides, so he put a section of pipe down. As the excavator's skills continued to improve, these little guys seemed to have found the trick of excavation. After about a week, there was no more landslides. On the contrary, Su Ming still had a lot of pipes that were not used. At 3:30 in the morning, Su Ming was dozing off by the lake, his head nodding, and his mental power was scattered in the water. Defoe and Wang Ke were lying on the grass on both sides of him and had fallen asleep long ago, but as soon as there was any movement, the wolf-dog brothers' ears would stand up alertly. A large group of water suddenly appeared on the water surface, and the alligator turtle floated up from the water with mud and water plants, stretched its neck towards Su Ming, and its thick neck bulged and made a hoarse sound. Su Ming suddenly opened his eyes and was shocked. Finally dug through the first passage. Within the perceptible range, the bottom of Shuahun Lake and the reservoir in the distance have been connected by a channel with a diameter of several dozen centimeters. The lake water on both sides blends and circulates with each other in the channel. The poor quality dead water in Shuahun Lake flows into the reservoir along the channel, and the high quality living water in the reservoir slowly flows into Shuahun Lake. Not far from this channel, there are 4 channels of similar size, which are also about to be dug to the end. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 53. With the first underwater channel running through, the opposite Huading Reservoir of Shuahun Lake was finally connected, and the lake water on both sides slowly flowed to each other along the underground channel. The national standard divides water quality into 5 levels. Class I is source water, National Nature Reserve, theoretically the best water quality, but it is very rare and almost non-existent in human gathering areas. Class II is suitable for centralized drinking water, first level protection area of surface water source, habitat of rare aquatic organisms, spawning grounds of fish and shrimp, feeding grounds of fry and young fish, etc. Class III is second level protection area of surface water source, wintering and migration channels of fish and shrimp, aquaculture areas and other fishery waters and swimming areas. Class 4 is general industrial water use area and recreational water area without direct human contact. Class V is agricultural water use area and general landscape water area. Water below the fifth category is basically of no use value, which is generally referred to as wastewater. Huading Reservoir itself is a national scenic spot, and its water quality has reached the second category. The second category of water source can be said to be the best water source in human settlements. It is precisely because of this that the fish raised in Huading Reservoir are delicious and very popular in the market. The water quality of Shuahun Lake belongs to the fifth category, the last category, which is very different from the water quality of Shuahun Lake. It is not certain whether the fish can be raised alive. Even if they can be raised, the taste must be very bad. It is barely enough to eat them yourself, let alone sell them in the market. It is precisely because of this that the old fisherman Zhu Chenggui told Su Ming that if he wanted to raise fish on a large scale in Shuahun Lake, he must first improve the ecology of Shuahun Lake and improve the water quality in a few years. Now, with the underwater channel connecting Shuahun Lake and Huading Reservoir, the water on both sides of the lake flows. In theory, it will not take long for the water quality of Shuahun Lake to be close to that of Huading Reservoir. When it was almost dawn, the remaining channels were also opened. Big Head, follow the passage and swim to the other side to have a look. Su Ming gave the big head catfish an order. Pathfinders are usually cannon fodder. If the passage collapses and big fish appear in the opposite reservoir, any small accident can cost their lives. The big head catfish is a cowardly guy. After receiving the order, he summoned dozens of loaches and a group of crabs without hesitation, and then carefully entered a slightly larger underwater passage, followed by the loach and crab team. It is not stupid. In case of blockage or landslide, it can be pressed in the mud, and the rescue team following behind can come in handy and rescue it as soon as possible. Oh my God, it turns out that you are not stupid. When you are afraid of death, you are smarter than anyone else. Su Ming was stunned and laughed. Big Head swam slowly forward along the channel. The water on both sides of the lake was slowly flowing around him. Occasionally, some small fish and shrimps from unknown places would mix into the channel. Big Head passed by them and scared them to run around. There was no danger along the way. Most of the places in the channel were reinforced with pipes, and there would be no more landslides. At most, there would be some mud and gravel blocking the road, but with the rescue team following behind, this was not a problem. The loaches could easily loosen the obstacles in front, and then crabs and lobsters would come together to clear the pipes. In short, everything was calm. After half an hour, a small bright spot suddenly appeared in front of the dark channel. It seemed that it was about to reach the end of the channel. Big Head's tail swung hard, like a small torpedo, and drilled out of the channel with a bang and entered the waters of Huading Reservoir. As soon as he entered the reservoir, Big Head immediately felt a sense of euphoria and ease. He turned around happily and had a lot of fun. The water quality here is much better than that of Shuahun Lake. It's like a person who lives in the capital and breathes smog all day long, and comes to a paradise with green mountains and clear water. Big Head is also a veteran under Su Ming. He has cooperated with Su Ming many times. The spiritual connection between the two is much more stable than that of ordinary animals. If other animals are at such a long distance, Su Ming can't contact each other at all. Even so, the distance of more than 1 kilometer makes Su Ming feel overwhelmed. The spiritual practice between him and Big Head is intermittent and becomes extremely weak, so he shouted, "You will have fun in the future. Find out the environment for me first." Su Ming is the boss of Big Head, the breadwinner and spiritual sustenance of Big Head. His instructions are better than anything else. Even to some extent, they can suppress the nature of Big Head as a fish who loves water. After receiving the instructions, Big Head stopped swaying immediately. The meat beard on the mouth swayed slightly with the water waves. He opened his two round big fish eyes and carefully observed the surrounding environment. The exit of the passage is under a small hill. The hill is made of a mixture of stone and soil. It is relatively solid and will not collapse unless there is a rare heavy rainstorm. The location is also relatively remote. There are no roads around, only bushes. Some water birds have settled down in the bushes. The exits of the 5 passages are all about 3 meters below the water surface. The shallowest exit is more than 2.5 meters. This was planned by Su Ming before digging the hole. The exit must be remote and secret enough to be difficult to be discovered. He didn't want to spend a lot of effort to drill through the passage, but be easily blocked by others from the other end. From the current point of view, the location of these exits is very good and it is almost impossible to be discovered. In the reed marsh not far away, a long-billed water bird seemed to have discovered the existence of the big head. It spread its wings, and the water bird's long legs exerted force, and its body flew into the air, and it swooped down towards the big head close to the water surface. The water bird swooped down above Big Head like an arrow, and pecked at Big Head's head with its long and sharp beak. Wow! The sharp beak of the water bird plowed a long wave on the water surface, and flew over almost flat on the water surface. Fortunately, Big Head had been with Su Ming for a long time, and his reaction and physique were much stronger than those of ordinary catfish. At the critical moment, Big Head used a 1,000-pound weight, and the fat fish tail swung desperately, and Big Head plunged into the deep water head first, barely escaping the disaster. Even so, the Big Head was so scared that his soul flew away. There was a puff of muddy water behind his tail, and he actually lost control of his bowels and bladder. Although the big head catfish is now more than 1 foot long and its size is not inferior to that of water birds are its natural enemies. Even if it grows to 10 or 20 kilograms, it will be scared to hide when it sees water birds. In the eyes of water birds, it is nothing more than a piece of larger meat. Seeing that the food in its mouth slipped away, the water bird was somewhat unwilling to circle on the water surface for a few weeks, croaking at the water surface twice, and finally had no choice but to fly away. The big head in the lake was still in shock, running around like crazy. Even Su Ming's mental comfort could not calm it down immediately. After all, the two sides were too far apart. The big head went up and down like this, sometimes rushing to the east, sometimes rushing to the west. After more than 10 minutes, the big head had been away from the shore for dozens of meters, and his emotions gradually calmed down. It shook its tail and was about to turn around and swim towards the passage, but it found that it had no strength. It seemed like something behind it was grabbing it tightly. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 54. Big Tou's little heart, which had finally calmed down, immediately began to beat wildly again. It was so frightened that it struggled desperately to get rid of the monster behind it. Unexpectedly, with such force, it was caught tighter. It turns out that there was a flurry just now, and Big Tou didn't know what happened. He actually broke into a fishing net and his tail was caught in the net. The arrangement of fishing nets is very particular. The fishing nets arranged by veterans are not used to catch fish, but to entangle them. As soon as fish and shrimps come into contact with the fishing net, they will be tightly entangled. The more they struggle, the more the fishing net will, the tighter the fish scales become, the harder it will be for even large fish to escape, and they will eventually be entangled and left to die. At this time, what entangled the big head was a piece of fishing net extending to both sides with no end in sight, forming a long underwater Great Wall, surrounding the vast water area on one side of Huading Reservoir. On the other side of the fishing net, the inside, is a lively scene. A large number of fish of all kinds were swimming around, including small crucian carp as long as a finger, herring and grass carp weighing 3 to 4 pounds, silver carp as big as chopsticks, and big head carp weighing about half a pound. In the mud at the bottom, there were fish weighing 4 to 5 ounces each. The heavy snakehead fish opens its mouth wide and looks for anything to eat. It is simply a world full of fish. Don't be afraid, big head, I will send shrimp soldiers and crab generals to rescue you. Su Ming quickly sent out a pair of crabs, waving their claws and rushing towards the fishing net. On a shoal east of Huading Reservoir, there were dozens of boxes containing fish fry. The bald man led a group of men to lift each box and dump it into the reservoir. The small fish crowded in the boxes fell into the water with a splash, swimming around quickly. Not far away, there were trucks in 2s and 3s, constantly delivering fish fry boxes to the shoal. Fish fry were constantly being dumped into the lake, and soon the lake was overcrowded with fish. There were all kinds of small fish flapping their tails and swimming around. Then new fry were poured into the lake. Side. The so-called fry are not the kind of translucent small fish that are only a few millimeters in size. Common fish such as the 4 major species of fish can be considered fry when they grow to a few ounces in weight. Farmers buy fry that weigh a few ounces in weight and breed them. In as little as half a year, as slowly as 1 year, you can raise them to a weight ranging from half a catty to several kilograms, and sell them on the market for money. Since the fry are relatively weak and unable to compete with the big fish for food, they must be raised together. When the fry grow to a certain size, they can be raised free range with other big fish. The owner of the fishing company, Zhou Jin, was wearing a pair of big rubber shoes and standing on the shoal. He looked at everything in front of him with great satisfaction and shouted to a group of his subordinates, "Be smart in recent times. Bald head, you can take a few people with you and live there on the river." The bald man waved to the other boys and motioned for them to go ahead. He trotted to Zhou Jin's side, took out a pack of Chinese cigarettes and handed one to Zhou Jin. He smiled and said, "Brother Zhou, don't worry, with us here, who dares to steal fish?" Zhou Jin took the cigarette and nodded, "I paid a lot of money for this batch of fry. They are all first-class seeds. There must be no mistakes." The bald man showed a ferocious smile and said with a grin, "This is what we do. If anyone dares to come here to fish and steal fish, I will break his legs." Zhou Jin glanced sideways at the bald man and said calmly, "Be careful and don't get disabled, let alone kill someone." "Brother Zhou, don't worry. All the brothers came from prison. It's not easy to get a few of them. You know it all." While Zhou Jin was releasing fry on the shore, the crab rescue team sent by Su Ming also arrived at the designated location. Beneath the invisible water surface, a dozen large crabs scrambled onto the fishing net, and with a few clicks, they tore a large hole in the fishing net that trapped the big-headed catfish. The big-headed catfish swung its tail and tried to escape, but Su Ming gave another order. After discovering this group of fry, Su Ming immediately realized that they must have been stocked by Boss Zhou of Huading Fishing Company. He is the only contractor in the entire Huading Lake, and there is no other contractor. Big Tiu could only obey his orders, and together with a group of crabs, got in through the hole in the fishing net. It wasn't until 9:30 in the morning, when the zoo was about to open, that the big-head catfish took a look inside the fishing net. The number of fry inside could not be counted. They were mainly the 4 major species of fish, as well as several other common edible species such as snakehead fish. Fish polyculture is not a sophisticated method. Most farmers will adopt polyculture, but the specific methods are different. Su Ming did a simple calculation and found that so many fish fry, plus the attached aquatic plants and shells, would probably require an investment of millions. The area of Shuahun Lake is not large. If the 4 major species of fish and snakehead fish are mixed according to what Zhu Chengui said before, the initial investment in fish fry will be about 300,000 to 400,000 yuan. Moreover, it is Su Ming's first time to come into contact with the breeding industry. First of all, he doesn't know. Where can I go to purchase fish fry on such a large scale? Secondly, I have no experience in judging the quality of fish fry. If I don't do it well, I spend a lot of money and buy a lot of diseased or inferior fish fry. If he were to switch to another fish farmer, Su Ming would still consider it. It would not be easy for others to work hard to raise fish. If he stole these fry, it would be an indirect harm to others. But for Huading Fishery Company, he didn't have this psychological burden at all. When Jojin came to ask for advice, Jojin's attitude was nothing more than that, but his group of people beat people and fined people that were close to stealing money, which is enough to show that these people are not kind-hearted people. Let's not talk about anything else. They let the wolfhounds bite people without saying anything that day. If it were someone else, without the ability of animal friends, he would have been bitten half to death by the two wolfhounds. After the conflict with the bald man, Su Ming was cautious and checked Jojin. The fish sold by his fishery company did have a good reputation, but Jojin and the fishery company itself had a bad reputation. It was said that Jojin did some bad things in his early years. At the beginning, he relied on some dishonorable means to force away several fishermen who wanted to contract Huading Reservoir. Later, when doing business, there was no lack of bullying and forced buying and selling. The fishery company only contracted a small part of the reservoir, but now it regards the entire reservoir as a forbidden delicacy. There are also many posts on the Yangchuan forum. They all went fishing near Huading Lake and were bitten by wolfhounds or beaten by people. Afterwards, whether they called the police or went to the door to ask for an explanation, it was all in vain. To put it bluntly, this fishery company is a business gang with a black and evil background. Su Ming showed no mercy in attacking Huading Fishery Company. All he had to do now was to wait for a week or two until the water in the reservoir and Shuahun Lake was completely circulated and the water quality of Shuahun Lake improved, then he could attack the fish fry in the reservoir. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 55. After Su Ming made up his mind, he sent his boss to monitor the reservoir while waiting for the water quality of Shuahun Lake to improve. He was not idle either. The cruise business could finally be moved to Shuahun Lake. This morning, Master Yang, who Wang Hao had hired to help inspect the cruise ship, drove a container truck in through the back door of the zoo and drove directly to a dock by Shuahun Lake. Lao Su, the boat is here. Wang Hao has become fatter and fatter recently, like a ball, and he rolled down from the passenger seat. Master Yang also got down from the driver's seat, said hello to Su Ming, and said with a smile, "Young people are awesome. It's only been a few days, but your business is getting bigger and bigger. The area of Shuahun Lake is more than 10 times larger than that of Feng Shui Pavilion. The original few small bumper boats were definitely not enough, so after deciding to transfer the cruise business to Shuahun Lake, Su Ming approached Master Yang for help. I went to the shipyard and booked 10 rowing boats, 8 pedal boats, and 2 assault boats. The cheapest hand rowing boat was just a big piece of iron, the pedal boat was slightly more expensive, and the most expensive was the assault boat, which together cost Su Ming Xiao 300,000 yuan. After Wang Hao heard about it, he actually took the initiative to invest all the more than 80,000 yuan he earned in the early stage as a secondary investment. According to him, what you put in will bring you rewards. Brothers will settle accounts clearly. Just because we have a good relationship, I can't just get a share of the dividends in vain. Master Yang directed the workers to unload all the boats from the containers and tie them to the lake. Wang Hao rubbed his hands enthusiastically. Hey, those 2 assault boats are so exciting. Let's go for a swim on the lake later. Go in a circle. Master Yang looked at the water of Shuahun Lake and suggested, a lake as big as yours only has 20 boats. Including the original bumper boats, there are only 28 boats. I'm afraid it's not enough. Judging from the area of Shuahun Lake, it can accommodate several times more boats. However, Su Ming no longer regards pleasure boats as his main business, let alone raising fish. There are too many pleasure boats on the lake, which is easy for the fish to be affected. Frightened. Moreover, Su Ming had calculated the passenger flow of the zoo and found that so many boats were just enough. During holidays, there might be queues for boating. If there were more boats, there would definitely be a lot of them vacant. This is neither necessary nor worthwhile. Among these ships, Su Ming also plans to separate one ship into a rescue ship and another into a dredging ship. After setting up the boat, Su Ming and Wang Hao jumped on an assault boat, put the life jackets on their necks, and started the motor. A gust of strong wind blew in the face, and the water waves broke along the sides of the assault boat. The assault boat rode the wind and waves, roaring onto the lake. The splashing water waves stirred up on both sides of the boat, like wild dogs running wildly, leaving a long trail of water waves behind him. The speed of an assault boat is actually not very fast, at least compared to a car, but on the water, the speed of 40 km per hour is enough to make people's blood swell and feel what speed and passion are. "I'm the king of the world," Wang Hao stood on the bow of the ship, opened his hands and faced the wind and screamed like a butchering pig. Su Ming laughed, "You are the king, so what am I? Is it Kui? I'm the big monster." Su Ming also stood up and roared into the wind. The pond is full of fish, shrimps, eels, and crabs, and they dance happily under the water. The cruise ship business was open again, and a small ticket office was built near the pier at the entrance of Tingfeng Pavilion. Su Ming hired Lao Zhutu, who used to sell souvenirs in Tingfeng Pavilion, to sell tickets. With Lao Zhou, the work burden of the several cats was suddenly relieved a lot. All they had to do was come one every day, sit on the window and pretend to be cool, and occasionally fiddle with the money. Unexpectedly, this has become a new gimmick. Generally, in small business places, there will be a lucky cat doll with a waving arm. Now, the cat sitting in the window who comes to get off work on time every day has become the lucky cat at the cruise ticket office. What the customer liked was what Su Ming wanted to provide, so he simply trained a few cats to learn a silly movement, sitting still, and then waving their forearms mechanically in tandem. This animal is exactly the same as the lucky cat doll. Every time it appears, it attracts the admiration of new tourists. It has become a living sign of the cruise ship. Some old tourists who had been to Feng Shui Pavilion looked at them with a very experienced look and said, "This is nothing, I tell you, this cat even asked me for 10 yuan before." Many onlookers will immediately ask curious questions. At this time, Lao Zhou will happily stick his head out of the ticket office and loudly tell the onlookers, "Don't worry, everyone, it's weekend." Every weekend, Lucky Cat will perform live tricks to collect money. It is foreseeable that the weekend business will definitely surge. Lao Zhutu shouted vigorously, and there was a reason for this. Although he is free at the zoo, his income is very small. He only earns 2,400 yuan a month. He is not even as good as a keeper. At least the keeper has various subsidies and so on. He is just a guard at the gate of Tingfeng Pavilion. Occasionally, she sold some souvenirs and the money was turned over to the zoo, so she lived a tight life. When Su Ming handed her a Chinese cigarette, he couldn't bear to smoke it. Su Ming now hires Lao Zhou to sell tickets, which is right next to Tingfeng Pavilion. It does not conflict with his own job and can be taken care of. Giving him 2,500 yuan a month will increase his income all of a sudden. Exactly twice as much. An old man with no education and no skills, can earn 5,000 yuan a month, which is comparable to white-collar workers in large companies. Old Joe is so happy that he can't stop smiling. When he sees people, he keeps praising Su Ming for his ability and kindness. In addition to Old Joe, Su Ming also hired Master Peng and Xiao Li, the keeper of Xiangshan. They work in shifts. When they are not feeding the animals, they go to the dock to manage the cruise ship, responsible for tourists getting on and off the ship and the daily maintenance of the cruise ship. If tourists are in danger, they can also provide timely rescue. Master Peng's family is in financial difficulties and he has a daughter who is in college. He is both Su Ming's master and a senior in the zoo. Su Ming gives him a monthly salary of 3,000 yuan, and no one will say anything. Xiao Li is a young man, just a scoundrel, and like Old Joe, he earns 2,500 yuan a month. Master Pen didn't say much to thank him, but he worked very hard and drank with people behind his back. Sometimes he would sigh and say that he was old and accepted a good apprentice. God opened his eyes. Xiao Li is a bit dull at ordinary times, but he knows what is good for him. After Su Ming helped him get rid of the beehive and saved him, he was grateful to Su Ming. Now he has become a die-hard fan of Su Ming. If he hears someone gossiping about Su Ming behind his back, he will jump out and argue with them. In fact, no one in the zoo really says bad things about Su Ming behind his back. People are always bullying others. Su Ming is very popular recently. The employees only regret that they did not establish a deep relationship with Su Ming early like Master Peng and others. How could they gossip? After hearing that Su Ming hired 3 employees, the zoo's top leader, the real boss, Director Song, did not hesitate to give Su Ming the quota of advanced workers in the second half of the zoo. After Su Ming knew about it, he could only smile helplessly. This old director doesn't need to make it so obvious that he values him. It's only a few months now. The advanced worker in the second half of the year has been decided. Old director. I absolutely cannot accept this honor, Su Ming said to Director Song in a firm tone. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 56. Why can't you have it? Director Song looked at Su Ming in confusion and said, to be honest, the advanced employees last time were more or less encouraging, but this time it's completely different. You really deserve this honor. Director Song nodded at the pile of materials in front of him and said, I won't mention saving people. The zoo's ticket revenue during this period has steadily increased by about 20% because of your cruise business. This is a big contribution. Secondly, for the honor you brought to the zoo, the superior unit commended us and approved funding. Thirdly, Lao Peng and Lao Zhou are old employees of the zoo. Their family conditions are not good. Although Xiao Li is young, they are also the backbone. My family is from a rural area and the conditions are not good. You hire them to increase their income and indirectly contribute to the zoo. Fourth, contracting Shuahun Lake generates more than 700,000 yuan for the zoo at one time. Fifth, what about, you are also very good at your job, and the pregnant female wolf in the wolf house only recognizes you now. Director, let me interrupt, Su Ming quickly interrupted Director Song, who was counting his achievements in detail. What does it mean that a pregnant she-wolf only recognizes me? It's not my fault that she got pregnant. You say. My dad once taught me a saying that people should not only look at the road ahead of them, but also look at the road behind them. The more beautiful the scenery, the more difficult it is to get carried away, Su Ming said. The words were a bit mysterious, but a person of Director Song's age could understand the meaning of Su Ming's words. However, he didn't expect that Su Ming would be able to say these words at his age, so he was a little surprised. He looked at Su Ming for a few seconds before saying, Are you afraid that someone will be jealous and make trouble with you behind your back? That's not true. The comrades in our park are still very easy to get along with, but I think it's better not to challenge human nature. Now I have made money, received honors, and my business is doing okay, so why bother spending all my money? All the benefits are taken away. For a false reputation and a few $100s, it will always block the way for other comrades to make progress. It won't do anything in a short time. Over time, it will inevitably make others dissatisfied, Su Ming said. Did you come up with these ideas yourself? The old principal looked at Su Ming with an even stranger look. Su Ming's opinion is very jarring in the workplace. If it comes from a veteran who has been in the workplace for decades, it would be reasonable. However, coming from Su Ming, a young man in his 20s who has just graduated from school, it is really very unsatisfactory. Principal Song was surprised. Even the old principal himself didn't think that deeply before, he just felt that Su Ming deserved this honor. Su Ming chuckled, everything requires knowledge. As I said before, no matter what you do, you have to put your mind into it. Su Ming knew very well that although he had the ability to be an animal friend, he still lived in the secular world. If he wanted to live comfortably, he had to handle the relationship with the people around him and this secular world. A coward will not become a real warrior just because he gets a golden finger, but will become a thug at most. A loser who cannot even be an ordinary person will not achieve ultimate success because of animal friends. Maybe one day, when the abilities of the animal friends reach a certain level, Su Ming won't have to worry about anything in the world, but it's obviously not now. What's more, the secular world of flowers also has countless wonderful things. Your consideration is not unreasonable. Let's do this. The candidates for the second half of the year will be vacant for the time being. The old director nodded, but let me tell you this. 2 days ago, the district asked all units to apply for model worker candidates, and our park applied for you. District model worker. Of course it hasn't been decided yet. There are so many units in the district, and there are only 10 model worker quotas in the end, so you may not be able to be selected, the old principal said. Su Ming thought for a while, but the district model worker was nothing to do. It was separated from the honor of the zoo itself and did not conflict with the honor of other employees. Even if it did conflict, it would be a conflict with Director Song. Obviously Director Song would not mind. It's midnight again. After hanging around the lake all day and in the middle of the night, Su Ming felt that he was about to develop night eyes. The surroundings were pitch black, but he could still see clearly. Even the slightest movement within a dozen meters could not escape his eyes. "Defu, will I be like you, with my eyes flashing at night?" Su Ming asked his wolfdog brother lying next to him. Wang Ke and Defu were squatting on the grass, raising their heads and looking at Su Ming with innocent and blank expressions, their 4 little eyes bright and bright. The wind blew, and a large dark cloud floated from a distance, blocking the already dim moon. "No light tonight? What a good day for stealing." Su Ming stretched his body and poured his mental energy into the lake. At the bottom of the artificial lake, the mud is rolling violently. Crabs, lobsters, and eels and loaches emerge from the darkness, twisting their bodies, or waving their big claws, gathering together to form dozens of small teams. Some of them had been exposed to mental power many times, and were slightly superior to their peers in terms of physical strength and intelligence. They naturally became squad captains. Su Ming devoted all his mental power to these squad captains, and they were then commanded by the squad captains. Respective teams. Rows of shrimp soldiers and crab generals, like an army, filed in and got into the passage leading to the Huading Reservoir opposite. Soon, this group of uninvited guests passed through the passage, one by one, and emerged from the exit of the passage in the direction of Huading Reservoir. They lined up and stopped in the water below the entrance of the cave, waiting for something quietly, like one by one. The military formation is waiting solemnly. The alligator snapper was too big to get through the passage. Today, the big-head catfish was the main force. It finally got out of the hole, twisted its body a few times, and swam to the front of the team. "Get started," Su Ming snapped his fingers and gave the big head an order. The big head swung its tail and swam forward. The whole team also moved, following the big head's footsteps and rushing to the fish fry net in the distance. Half an hour later, 5 large holes big enough for people to pass through were torn under the giant fishing net surrounding the fry. A pair of shrimp soldiers and crab generals rushed into the fishing net from these large holes. The fish and shrimps under Su Ming's command, according to the rehearsal of the past few days, lined up in rows, like a big whirlpool, enclosing an acre of water at a time, and then constantly shrinking the space to drive the fry in the enclosed water area to the center. The arrival of this group of uninvited guests immediately caused great panic among the fry, and the entire water area suddenly became boiling. There was some movement on the water surface, and water splashed from time to time. Baldhead and a few others were playing landlord in the shack. When they heard the movement outside, they rushed out with flashlights and sticks. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 57. Most of the people who come out to hang out are night owls. It's past 1 o'clock in the morning, and the lights in the fish shack on the shore are still on. There are beer bottles strewn about in the fish shack, and there are a few leftovers on the table. The bald man and a few gangsters are having a good time, fighting landlords with arms stretched out. What sound? The sound of water on the lake reached the fish shed. The bald man put the cards in his hand on the table, turned around and lay down on the window to look out. It's windy, what can happen in the middle of the night? Brother, show your cards, another gangster said nonchalantly. The bald man leaned against the window and took a few glances. It was dark outside and there was no one around. He kicked a guy who was dozing and said, "Second son, go out and see what's going on." The guy called second son muttered a few words, reluctantly got up, touched a flashlight, and walked out of the fish shed with the steel pipe in one hand. "Let's play cards." The bald man and a few others continued to play cards. Not long after, Ertzi came back, lay down on the bed and yawned. "I asked you to check, why did you come back so soon?" Baldhead kicked him again. Ertzi said impatiently, "It's no big deal, brother, it's just the fry jumping around. It's probably going to rain, the weather is stuffy and lacks oxygen." Under the surface of the lake, the shrimp soldiers and crab generals had herded together all the fry within a radius of 1 acre, and then, like escorting prisoners, they drove the group of fry toward the underwater channel outside the fishing net. Fish have the characteristic of following a crowd and will instinctively swim with large groups, especially small fish, because small fish have no ability to protect themselves and can easily be caught and eaten by other powerful aquatic creatures when acting alone. It would be much safer if the troops walked. The big head catfish leads the way, followed by thousands of fry, forming a long line, which is quite spectacular. The team was quite neat at first, but as soon as they left the fishing net and didn't swim far, something went wrong. Because there are too many fry and different varieties, there are 7 or 8 varieties of fish in this group of fry alone. Some fry deviate from the planned route and run in all directions because of fright or other reasons. The shrimp soldiers and crab generals wandered around the fish school. When they encountered a fry that broke away from the team, they rushed up and drove it back to the fish school's route. Of course, there are many fierce ones among the fry, and some fish are even natural enemies of shrimps and crabs. A small black fish weighing about half a caddy swung its tail, opened its big mouth and rushed towards a pair of shrimp soldiers and crab generals. Snakehead fish is different from timid and docile guys like crucian carp. Although this guy is an omnivore, it usually eats carnivores. It even has a ring of fine teeth in its mouth. It can be regarded as a more vicious type of freshwater fish. The black fish opened its mouth wide and sucked hard, bringing up a strong stream of water. The closest crayfish tried to escape with a flick of its tail, but the huge suction force pulled it down to the snakehead's mouth. The blackfish didn't bother at all. He closed his big mouth and easily bit the crayfish into 2 pieces. He swallowed the plump and juicy lobster tail in one go. The blackfish shook his head with satisfaction, then turned to bite the next target. There were so many shrimps and crabs nearby, all of which were his favorite foods. He could have a big meal without any trouble at all. From the perspective of the biological chain, snake-headed fish is the natural enemy of shrimps, soldiers, and crabs. Wherever it goes, those little crabs, crayfish, etc. should be scared and run for their lives. But it immediately discovered something was wrong. After a crayfish companion was sacrificed, the remaining shrimp soldiers and crab generals not only did not escape, but instead surrounded it from all directions. There was a slight pain behind the blackfish. A small crab, only 1/10 of its size, had its tail clamped hard by two big claws. This small injury was nothing to the blackfish. It flicked its tail hard and immediately threw the little crab away. It turned around and wanted to severely punish the audacious crab. Before it could rush over, unbearable pain was felt in several other parts of its body, and several more crabs and lobsters caught it. A small crab, not much bigger than a coin, even clung to its gills insidiously. A small but extremely sharp claw stabbed hard into the blackfish's eyeball. The blackfish was so frightened that he didn't even care about punishing the crab before. He only wanted to get rid of these nasty little guys. He twisted his body desperately in the water, trying to use the power of the current and his own swing to break free and lie on his body. Those shrimps and crabs. There was a scuffle in the water, and crabs and lobsters were constantly being thrown away, but soon after, more shrimp soldiers and crabs rushed towards the blackfish without fear of death. Soon, the blackfish's body was covered with a layer of armor. Dozens of crabs and lobsters of different sizes, like maggots on the tarsal bones, climbed all over the blackfish's body. This scene can be seen everywhere. Of course, the fierce characters in the group of fry are not aware of this blackfish. Blackfish, herring, and even grass carp are not characters to be trifled with. There are constantly fry trying to break away from the large group, or to prey on the surrounding shrimp soldiers and crab generals. As natural enemies, the individual fighting power of these fierce fry far exceeds that of crabs and lobsters. However, after being trained by Su-ming, the crabs and lobsters at this time were no longer the stragglers they were before. They had become an army with an orderly division of labor and a fearlessness of death. After paying a small price, they easily suppressed the fierce fry who dared to cause riots. One by one, the fierce fry rushed out of the team with high spirits. Not long after, they were all injured and were driven back to the main force in despair. They followed the main force obediently through the underwater passage and arrived at the Shuahun Lake. Su-ming sat in an assault boat and drove to the water above the passage to wait. Whenever a fry came in, he would directly use his mental power to brainwash them unreasonably to completely overwhelm the fry. If his current mental power does not require control, but is just for conquest, there will be no pressure at all to deal with those small fish fry that have almost no intelligence and can be brainwashed easily. There were too many fry to count, and his mental strength quickly reached the bottom. Su-ming picked up the honeycomb on the boat, stuffed it with a ball of honey, and took a sip. Soon, all the fish fry that were originally in the reservoir and an entire acre of water were driven into Shuahun Lake, completely becoming Su-ming's private property. The shrimp soldiers and crab generals reorganized their teams and returned to the Huading Reservoir. They once again enclosed an acre of water like a land enclosure, and followed the same method, driving the fry into the Shuahun Lake like sheep. After a whole night, the fish fry in Shuahun Lake finally became saturated. The types of fish include not only the four major fishes and snakehead fish that Zhu Chenggui mentioned before, but also many carp, cocked fish, and the like. Su-ming's mental power was depleted time and time again, and then replenished quickly. With the help of Big Blue Honey, he was like a perpetual motion machine, and his mental power would never run out. Su-ming calculated that this batch of fry alone would save at least 4 to 5 million, and that was if the transaction went smoothly without being cheated. But for the fishing company, the loss is not just 4 to 5 million. On the one hand, during the escort process, although the shrimp soldiers and crab generals were very responsible, many fry still escaped. The most terrible thing is that there are several big holes in the fishing net. In a few days, the remaining fry in the net will escape through these holes. Old Joe, I've suffered so much for you. Su-ming sincerely bowed with his hands clasped in the direction of the fishery company's villa, and then without blushing and without a beating heart, he sent out shrimp soldiers and crab generals to collect the various snails, algae, etc. used by the fishery company to raise fish fry, pile them into the Shuahun Lake. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 58. Now that the fish fry are available, and they are all of good quality, fish farming can finally take its first step. Next, there is the issue of feed. Early the next morning, Su Ming went online to check information about sea fish. Zhu Chenggui said before that the key to polyculture lies in the snake-headed fish. The snake-headed fish must be fed with miscellaneous fish regularly, so that the oily and highly nutritious snake-headed fish daddy can be produced, which can serve as high-energy food for other types of fish. The so-called miscellaneous fish is not a kind of marine fish, but a collective name for many kinds of marine fish. These sea fish are either very small, or simply do not grow very big, and their taste is not as good as other sea fish, but the advantage is that they are large in quantity. Fishermen can catch a lot of them in one net when they go out to sea. The commercial value of these fish is not high, and they are generally sold by the ton and processed into feed, which is an ancillary value generated by fishing. There are quite a few fish sellers online, including fresh, frozen, and even processed fish. But the price made Su Ming frown slightly. The cheapest one costs 1,200 yuan per ton, and the better ones cost between 1,500 and 2,000 yuan. If you add shipping costs, it's even more expensive. Snakehead fish are inherently very edible. The more they eat, the faster they grow. At the same time, they also undertake the important mission of pulling daddy. They not only have to poop, but also poop a lot, so that the quality and quantity of poop can be maintained. Therefore, a large amount of marine trash fish is needed to feed snake-headed fish. According to the density of snake-headed fish farming in Shuahun Lake, a batch of fish will cost at least several hundred tons of trash fish from the beginning to the time it is sold on the market, plus a small amount of other feeds. The feed cost alone will cost at least $5,600,000. It's not that Su Ming can't get the money. He still has more than half of the money he earned from selling monkey wine last time, more than 1 million, but in business, you have to leave a way out. It's not yet certain how the sales of this batch of fish will be in the future. It would be a bit risky to invest most of the money rashly. But in order to ensure the quality of the fish, he still had to buy offshore fish. Su Ming first ordered 10 tons of offshore fish and a small amount of sporadic feed online. He paid 20,000 yuan in Alipay and promised to have the goods delivered within 2 weeks. After closing the computer, Su Ming's eyes rolled. We have to find a way to make up for the feed money from other places. While Su Ming was thinking about the feed money, at the Huading Reservoir, the bald man and a group of men rowed a boat to the Huading Lake, opened the bags of high-quality fish feed on the boat, and poured them into the lake. A large amount of fish feed was sprinkled on the water, causing splashes and slowly sinking into the water. However, there was no grand scene of tens of thousands of fish competing for it. Occasionally, a few small fish appeared here and there, appearing clearly on the large lake. Sparsely. Why doesn't the fish speak? The bald man said strangely. Zhou Jin sat next to him, looked up at the weather, and said, "The newly released fish are like this. They are frightened and will take a few days to eat. The weather is relatively dull in this short period of time, so it is normal not to open their mouths. You guys, be careful and don't let anyone steal the fry." The bald man slapped his chest heavily. "Brother Joe, don't worry. If the fish doesn't speak, I can't do anything about it. But if someone steals the fry under my nose, I'm the only one you can ask." Zhou Jin nodded with satisfaction, glanced at the gauze wrapped around the bald man's head, and patted the bald man on the shoulder. "I can rest assured that you will do your job well. When this period of work is over, I will give you tens of thousands of yuan to help you go and vent your anger." "Thank you, Brother Joe." Zhou Jin snorted coldly. "You and I are not the same as each other. Of course I will take care of you if something happens to you. Besides, the boy named Su still wants to steal business from us. If we don't teach him a lesson, no one will dare to fight against us in the future." The next 2 days were uneventful. The fish fry in Shuahun Lake had just arrived and had not opened their mouths to eat for the time being. Su Ming did not have to worry about them. The cruise ship business is also good. There are more than 20 boats, open 8 hours a day, and the occupancy rate is almost 70 to 80%. They are managed by Master Peng, Lao Zhutu, and Xiao Li. Su Ming is relieved. Just send a cat to act as a mascot from time to time. Su Ming lowered the price of the cruise ship slightly. The average price for various types of boats is about 30 yuan an hour. Based on the passenger flow in the past few days, plus the foreseeable popularity of holidays, the monthly income of the cruise ship business should be around 150,000 yuan. If the business is good, it is not impossible to exceed 200,000 yuan. Putting aside various expenses, Su Ming and Wang Hao can make a stable net income of 50,000 yuan a month, which can be regarded as a moderate and stable income. The so-called neither big nor small is just from Su Ming's perspective. He currently has a 7-digit bank card in his pocket, and tens of thousands of dollars is nothing to him. But for Wang Hao, 50,000 yuan a month is a huge sum of money. Civil servants at his level only earn a few thousand yuan a month. Even if he risks losing his head and becomes greedy like crazy, he may not be able to get so much in a month. Wang Hao has been a little worried about gains and losses these days, and he is not feeling well. He is about to become a small rich man, and Land Rover and long-legged girls seem to be within reach, but he dare not show his ecstasy, especially I didn't dare to tell his old man. He didn't have to worry about anything for a month, and he had 50 or 60,000 in vain. He was afraid of scaring his old man if he said it. Everyone would be a bit confused when this happens to them. Everyone hopes that a gold ingot will fall from the sky and hit them. However, if one day they are hit by a gold ingot while walking on the street, I am afraid they will be dumbfounded at the time. Old Su, how did this happen? I can't figure it out. It's been less than 2 months since I graduated, and I'm about to make nearly $1 million a year? I really can't figure it out. It's like a dream. Wang Hao's voice was shaking a little on the other end of the phone. Then I wish your dream come true, Su Ming laughed. This is just the beginning. The cruise business has only been going on for a few days. Even if it continues like this, it seems that there is still a long way to go before the annual income of 1 million. Besides, Su Ming knows better than anyone that the cruise business can reach this scale, which is almost the limit. There will be no explosive growth in the short term. Even if there is a larger lake and more ships, it will only lead to vacancy. Unless his capital increases by a large amount again, the cruise business will enter another level. For example, contract all the cruise business in West Lake, Hangzhou, or start a cruise business in a freshwater lake or even on the Yangtze River. However, this goal is too far away at present. Without tens of millions of capital and a strong background, it is basically impossible. Gozi got in touch with the bee colony. Under the leadership of the queen bee, the bees and wasps found a good new home, which is almost in the deep mountains. It is very safe, and the flowers and plants around are extremely lush, which is perfect for making honey. The only drawback is that the place is too far away and the road is not easy to walk. Su Ming estimates that it will take several days to go back and forth. He can only wait for a while, and the fish farming business will be completely stable, and then find a free time to go and see. During the day, Su Ming took Defu Wangke to stroll around, feed the animals, and let the wolfdog brothers get to know other animals in the zoo to avoid accidental injuries in the future. Most animals are easy to get along with. Some small guys like red foxes are afraid of wolfdogs. Because of Su Ming, the bear family is quite enthusiastic about the wolfdog brothers, and even has a friendly gesture of inviting the wolfdog brothers to eat watermelon. Although the tigers are domineering and arrogant, they don't make things difficult for the wolfdog brothers. The only thing that doesn't look right is the wolf house. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 59. Every time the Wolfdog brothers met the Wolf King, they looked like enemies meeting and getting jealous. As they were once the same species, they now disliked each other. Every time they met, they would roar fiercely across the cage. The reason was obvious to Su Ming. The Wolf King probably thought that you guys had long given up the glory of your ancestors and became shameless domestic dogs that licked humans. You dared to hang around in front of me. You are so shameless. In the eyes of the Wolfdog brothers, no matter how awesome you are still trapped in a cage. If the daffodils don't bloom, why are you pretending? However, the Wolf King's wife, who was about to give birth to a baby, was actually quite nice to the two wolf dogs, which made Su Ming feel very sorry for the Wolf King. Xiao Su, hurry up, the mother wolf has given birth, you have to go. Early on Tuesday morning, Master Peng hurriedly called Su Ming out of the waterside pavilion and dragged him towards the wolf house. Master Peng's original intention was to hope that Su Ming could be by the side when the wolf cub was born. The first thing the wolf cub saw after it was born was Su Ming, so it would naturally feel close to Su Ming, and it would be convenient to raise and manage it in the future. Master Peng meant well, but Su Ming always felt that his words were weird. Why do I have to go when the mother wolf gives birth? Although I am a big monster, the mother wolf's cubs have nothing to do with me. Having said that, Su Ming was still very happy when he heard that the mother wolf gave birth. Damn it, I'm finally liberated, and I don't have to see the stinky face of the pregnant wolf anymore. Also liberated was the Wolf King, who had suffered a lot of humiliation during this period. Strangely enough, the wolves in the zoo were probably raised to lack some wildness, and their tempers and habits were different from those of the wolves in the wild. Wolves value their cubs and are loyal to their partners, but I have never heard of a male wolf being so loving a pregnant female wolf. During the period of the female wolf's pregnancy, her temper was quite bad. She was always rude to the Wolf King, but the Wolf King endured it all. He had no domineering attitude of a king at all, and looked like a bullied little man. Su Ming felt very pitiful when he saw her. The time of pregnancy of female wolves is also different from that of wild wolves. Most wild wolves give birth in spring. In spring, everything comes back to life. Various animals are not at their peak physical strength because they have been hungry for a winter, and they are eager to find food. Their vigilance is greatly reduced, which makes it easier for female wolves to hunt. With sufficient food, the female wolf can produce a lot of milk to feed the little wolf cubs. The wolves in the zoo have no concerns about food. Although they cannot reach the level of eating well, they can still eat enough, so even the time of giving birth has changed, sometimes in summer, sometimes in autumn. What's even more strange is that when a female wolf gives birth, there are usually at least 3 or 4 cubs in a litter, but this female wolf in the zoo only gave birth to one little wolf cub. Everyone was very confused. 9 dogs and 1 mastiff, the only one is the most ferocious, and I don't know if this only little wolf cub will become the strongest wolf when he grows up. Anyway, it's finally born, which is a good thing for everyone. The weather is too hot, and the female wolf is pregnant again. The zoo spent a lot of money to install a glass house and air conditioning in the wolf house. Looking through the transparent glass, the Wolf King sat quietly in the cage, looking around with some vigilance from time to time. The female wolf lay in the wolf den, and her tongue kept licking a large piece of something that looked like a placenta. It didn't want to eat the placenta, but to lick off the bloody smell on the placenta to avoid attracting other carnivores and threatening the newborn cubs. Although some habits of the wolves in the zoo have changed, most of their natures still remain in their bones. Next to the mother wolf, there was a little wolf cub with gray fur and black wolf hair, which kept getting into the mother wolf's arms. Director Song lay on the railing beside the wolf house, leaning forward, squinting his eyes and staring at the mother wolf and the little wolf for a while, and said, "The Wolf King and his wife are both old wolves. The mother wolf is 2 years older than the Wolf King. I guess she doesn't have much milk. Old Pen, come with me and take the little wolf out to feed it." The lifespan of a prairie wolf is generally only 12–16 years. The Wolf King and his wife were already 10 years old when they came to the zoo, and they have lived here for another 2 years. According to human terms, they are all elderly people, which is considered to be old age. Especially the mother wolf, who has reached her twilight years. Of course, she doesn't have much milk. "Let me do it," Su Ming quickly persuaded Director Song and Master Peng. Wolves are very aggressive by nature, and the mother wolf is in a sensitive period of nervousness to protect the little wolf. It is extremely dangerous to approach the little wolf at this time. Although the zoo has a set of protective measures, it is not 100% safe. If other people go, even if they can guarantee the safety of people, it is easy to scare the female wolf who has just given birth. It would be bad if she has postpartum depression or something like that. Director Song looked at Su Ming and nodded, then signaled Master Pen to give the bottle to Su Ming and patted Su Ming on the shoulder. "Be careful." Su Ming carried the bottle, went around the back of the wolf house, opened the iron door, and went in through the breeder's passage. Similar to the internal structure of Xiangshan, the breeder's passage behind the wolf house and the wolf house are separated by an iron fence. The mother wolf was lying not far from the iron fence. Su Ming squatted beside the fence and could reach out to touch the wolf cub. Hearing the footsteps approaching, the mother wolf, who was lying down, jumped up all of a sudden as if she had been electrocuted. The wolf howl on her neck exploded, and she used her body to block the little wolf, grinning and showing her fangs and growling. "Easy," Su Ming released a mental force and shook the bottle at the mother wolf. The mother wolf smelled the familiar scent on Su Ming, so she let down her guard and lay down beside the wolf cubs again. When Su Ming got closer, he could see the wolf cubs clearly. The little wolf cubs were slightly larger than his palm, and there was a thin layer of gray film on their eyeballs. They were blue and full of water, and the pupils were black. Seeing the stranger coming in, the little guy who was trying to get into the mother wolf's arms just now suddenly straightened his tail and limbs, tilted his body, and fell to the ground with his head down. His eyes were closed, and his body became very stiff and motionless. It seemed that the little wolf cub was frightened by Su Ming and had a heart attack and died suddenly. "The acting is too exaggerated," Su Ming almost laughed. The little wolf cub didn't recognize him. He was pretending to be dead. So he released a faint mental power and tried to probe the little wolf cub. The newborn wolf cub had a natural sensitivity to spiritual power. Once it came into contact with spiritual power, it immediately realized that the big guy in front of it was not hostile. On the contrary, it had a feeling of attachment to it. The wolf cub then let down its guard, opened its eyes little by little, looked at Su Ming curiously, then shook its head and struggled to climb up. It stretched out its little claws and waved them randomly in the air a few times, as if trying to grab that spiritual power, but it missed, lost its balance, and fell down again. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 60. The newly born wolf cub has little strength, its legs are soft and its feet are soft, making it difficult to walk. A few more falls will only benefit its growth, not harm. Su Ming bent down and looked at the female wolf's breasts. Sure enough, they were shriveled and there was no milk. Thinking about it, the age of the female wolf, if replaced by humans, would be at least 60 years old. It is already a miracle that she can still give birth to cubs at this age. Of course, there is no way she has any milk. I never thought that a big monster like me would one day be a wet nurse. Su Ming shook his head and smiled, unscrewing the bottle and passing the pacifier through the fence. But instead of handing it to the cub, he brought it to the mother wolf's mouth first. The female wolf sniffed the pacifier, then stuck out her tongue in confusion and licked the pacifier. Su Ming squeezed a little harder, and a few streaks of milky white juice spattered from the nipple and fell into the she-wolf's mouth. A few drops of milk dripped down the mother wolf's fur. The cub smelled the smell and immediately squeezed over. He stretched out his barbed tongue and tried his best to lick the mother wolf's milk-stained fur, making a strange sound. "Drink for little wolf," Su Ming said with a smile. The mother wolf pulled her front legs and pushed the little wolf aside, then lowered her head and licked the milk on the fur with her tongue. After making sure it was safe, she felt relieved, picked up the little wolf in her mouth, and let go in front of Su Ming. Seeing the pacifier coming closer, the little wolf cub let out a cry of woo, stumbled towards the pacifier, took the pacifier in his mouth, and sucked it hard. A bunch of bubbles popped out of the bottle, and a lot of milk dripped down the corner of the little wolf's mouth. Outside the wolf house, Director Song and Master Peng, they had been staring closely at what was going on inside since Su Ming entered the wolf house. Only then did a few people relax. Master Peng chuckled, "Xiao Su, this kid is really good at this job. It seems that there is no animal in the world that he can't deal with." Director Song also nodded and said, "Okay, leave the wolf to Xiao Su. We don't want to surround it here. Otherwise, we will scare the wolf, which is not beautiful." Seeing the people outside the wolf house leaving, Su Ming thought it was too troublesome to feed the wolf through the cage, so he sent a comforting message to the female wolf. Seeing that the female wolf had no objection, he simply opened the small door between the keeper and the wolf house. "Open the door and sneak into the wolf house." Seeing Su Ming come in, the Wolf King and the other wolves glanced this way, but there was no other movement, no objection, and no attack. The female wolf stood up, stretched out like a big dog, yawned, and then lay there again, watching Su Ming feed the cub. Su Ming sat down against the railing, casually lifted the little wolf into his arms, hugged it with one hand, and fed it with a bottle in the other. The little wolf cub doesn't look much different from the puppy, but after touching it with his own hands, he realized that there is still a big difference. When a puppy is born, its fur is very soft and smooth, and its first impression is that it is very cute. But the wolf puppy is completely different. It is still a wild animal in nature, although it has fine, soft, and loose ash on its body. Colorful down, but some long, hard, and black wolf hairs are sparsely emerging from the down. The short hairs are long and uneven. They are full of wildness. When you hold them in your arms, there is still a bit of a pricking feeling. There is a faint smell of wolf smell in the stock, but it is not unpleasant, it just smells of wildness. The little wolf cub's head is black and shiny, and its eyes can't be fully opened. They are half squinted, but they have already grown thin fangs. The fangs protrude from the edge of the pacifier, and they grin when they drink milk. Yes, it looks much more ferocious than a puppy. Seeing the little wolf biting the pacifier with its fangs, Su Ming subconsciously touched his chest, feeling a chill on his chest. A few minutes later, Su Ming touched the wolf cub's belly. It was already a little bulging. He lifted the guy by the back of his neck and put it down. The little wolf cub still refused to leave. His stomach was swollen and he couldn't stand up. So he lay down next to Su Ming and turned over with his belly facing up. His 4 little paws were waving towards Su Ming. Su Ming looked at how small he was. He stretched out a finger and tapped the little guy's belly. The little guy made a very comfortable purring sound. He held Su Ming's finger with his 2 front paws and put it into his mouth. Su Ming only felt that his fingers were itchy, numb, and a little painful, so he quickly pulled his fingers out of the wolf's mouth. The wolf cub was still young, had little strength, and had not even grown all its teeth. Furthermore, its biting on Su Ming was mostly for fun, and it would not cause any harm to Su Ming. "You dare to bite me," Su Ming smiled and flicked the little wolf's head with his finger. The little wolf whined and screamed strangely, rolled around, then twisted its body to get up, and tried to move towards Su again. Ming leaned close to him. After playing with the wolf for a while, the cub finally became sleepy. Su Ming carried it back to the wolf den and placed it under the mother wolf. The cub pressed against the mother wolf's belly and fell asleep soon after. It also made a very slight whirring sound. The female wolf stood quietly on one side, with her eyes half open and half closed. The wolf king and several wolves were guarding outside, and everything was quiet and peaceful. Miss Red Fox, who lived next door, was leaning on the glass window and peering over here, her two little eyes wide open, looking curiously at the newborn wolf cub. "What a tragedy, single dog, oh no, single fox," Su Ming grinned at Red Fox. The Red Fox stared at Su Ming for a long time with cold eyes. Finally, he turned around coldly and arrogantly, flicked his big furry tail, and wandered back into the woods, leaving behind a lonely figure. After the mother wolf gave birth to the cubs, the zoo simply transferred Su Ming to another shift, asking him to temporarily put aside other work and be a full-time nanny for a while. Although the work content was reduced, the workload increased. If it were someone else, it would take a lot of time just to appease the mother wolf and the extremely active little wolf cubs, but Su Ming did not have such trouble. He took half an hour to feed the cubs twice a day, and basically the work for the day was done. I don't know if it's because the milk provided by the zoo is nutritious or because of the friends of animals. Anyway, in just a few days, the little wolf cubs have grown a lot stronger and more energetic. Unlike at the beginning when they couldn't even stand steadily, they can now run wildly in the wolf house. The Shuahun Lake is also full of vitality. The boating tourists suddenly found that this originally lifeless lake seemed to have a lot of fish of various kinds. After a few days, the newly arrived fish fry finally adapted to the environment. They would occasionally pop up on the water surface and even perform tricks like carp leaping over the Dragon Gate, which attracted many tourists who brought bread, steamed buns, and other things to feed the fish. If it was just bread and steamed buns, it would be fine. Although there was no benefit to the fish, it would not be harmful either. But after a few days, Su Ming found something wrong.